All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Broadcast Team Alpha. We have some very special programming today, bringing you cutting edge conversations while exploring the quantum possibilities. And with our amazing guest today, we are certainly going to be living up to our tagline. So, Augie, you want to tell us a bit more?
Oh yeah, this will be so much fun. We have one of our favorite people with us, Dan Willis. He is doing what many people would love to do. He's living on a mountain, totally off grid. He is totally self-sufficient, and boy, oh boy, I would love to do that. And he is a researcher. He has been outside of the box. I'm sure he doesn't even know where the box is anymore. So far out there that he has done some phenomenal things. He has been a witness, and I want him to explain more of that. He has done research and he has gone back in history, analyzed our history, and brought it up to today, even what we expect to happen into the future. So, this is one man that you need to lend him your ear because there is real truth and there is information here that will blow you away. So, Dan, um, maybe you can say a little more about your background and especially the big meeting you did in Washington and what you have done since then.
Agi, Nori, good to be on the show again.
Thank you, Dan. So good to have you.
This is a little offshoot rather than, talking about a usual situation on the planet being hijacked technologically, by unwarranted influences. When I went to Washington, we had the scientists that could prove we had advanced technology, zero-point energy to release into the world, change the way everything is on this planet. But there's advanced sciences that are in these secret space programs that are far in advance. But back in the 70s, I got involved in some interesting science having to do with the science of consciousness and geometry. I worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel, who was IBM's head scientist. He just sharing the screen here.
Awesome.
Okay.
Um, anyway, yeah, Dr. Vogel. He was an incredible genius. When he was like 13 years old, he developed a lab in the back of his backyard that was researching why a firefly glowed. And he had this kind of mind that would not let up. And so he actually, as he grew older, he created a luminescence company in San Francisco. He had such a creative mind that IBM grabbed him up, and he had like 200 and some patents at IBM. The liquid crystal screen that you're watching right now was helped developed by him. The magnetic hard drive that you have in your computer, if you don't have a solid state drive, was developed by him in the magnetic coatings. Color television, the red and blue phosphors for television was created by him. He he had this incredible genius of a mind that a lot of the engineers at IBM didn't have quite the creativity of thinking out of the box the way he did. And so IBM wanted him to do a course for the about 30 engineers on creativity. Yeah, you might want to mute on your end, Nori, the microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, he happened to read this book by it was in a Fate magazine about Cleve Baxter, who was a CIA polygraph expert that was working with plants and noticing the reaction of plants. And he thought, well, these 30 engineers, I can give them this course and have them reproduce this experiment. And at first when he read it, he thought, oh, this is garbage, and he crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. But then he thought, oh no, this could work. And so he set up a split leaf philodendron onto a script chart recorder that would measure the response. He burned the plant leaf, and the plant squiggled on the script chart recorder. The thought formed in his mind to burn the plant again. The moment that the thought formed in his mind, the script chart recorder squiggled. He said that squiggle changed his life. Making a very long story short, he was doing a talk about plant-human communications. He was written up in the book Secret Life of Plants. A woman gave him a crystal, and he thought, oh, this is a woo-woo thing, you know. And so what he found was, when he was working with the plant, that his breath, when he was able to cause the plant to react with a squiggle, he found that he could go 7 miles away and tune in psychically to the plant with a lab assistant at the lab and cause it to squiggle with tuning into his mind. And he went all the way over the other side of the planet to Prague, Czechoslovakia, and was able to do it, showing that there's the inverse square law of distance doesn't apply. It's instantaneous with mind. And he found that the breath is connected to a multidimensional information transfer of information as we exhale and inhale. And he found that when he pulsed his breath, the script chart recorder would profoundly respond much higher. And so he had an associate at IBM had a back problem, and he pulsed his breath with a crystal, and it healed him. So anyway, he worked for some time to try to figure out how to make this into a transducer that could be more observable. And so he was able to cut the crystals into this pyramidal form as double terminations. Let me share some screen here. Bear with me. I'm trying to manipulate this. Here we go. Okay. And here's the script chart recorder. You can see the thought was formed, and you can see there's an extreme reaction. It was similar to the tree of life. This is me. I went to I was working for the Naval Electronic Engineering Center. I went to the mines in Arkansas to bring him, thousands of crystals. And he's cutting them in his garage, setting this up and tuning him with a radionic instrument. You can see the different sizes there. Here he is, he actually assembled his own electron microscope in the laboratory. I helped procure some of this equipment, such as this spectrophotometer, where you could pulse your breath into the water. It would change the energy bands of the water, showing that the energies of mind could interact with water. And this is the Delaware Camera. We'll get more into that later. What originally got me involved with this was an experience in 1977 with a being that let me share this. What happened was I didn't know anything about geometry. I had no geometry in school. I did not have any idea what a platonic solids were. This lady wanted to do a past life regression with me. And so as I was going into the past life regression, millions of volts were going through my hands and my feet in a Kundalini type of experience. And with my eyes closed, I mean, this is a very intense experience. I could see this being, and it was projecting with a large cranium and very loving energy, but extremely intense, and a lot of love coming from its eyes. And it was like some type of teaching experience with this being. And there's more to the story about extraterrestrials that happened before all this, but kind of an interesting sequence of events. But I'll try to summate it here kind of quickly. This being, as he projected in a sphere in space, I noticed that as I observed the sphere, a star tetrahedron type configuration formed into that. This is my Photoshop attempt to recreate what this experience was. One geometry went into the other, into the other, into the other, and it went into infinity, and then it turned back into a perfect sphere. And what this being was conveying was that, I don't know if this was like a metaphor teaching or if it was based on science. As the decades went by, I started realizing that there's a lot more to this than, let me stop the share there. There's a lot more to this than just a sphere with geometry. That the entire universe and our DNA and everything is based on this geometry. And that what the being was conveying was that through love, we are at a particular level of evolution. Each one of us is a perfect sphere in actuality that contains all the harmonics of all the vibrations. But at any particular point in our evolution, through love, we evolve from one frequency geometry into the next, where we are aware of the subharmonics, but not of the higher harmonics of that. And so, as I discovered over the decades, that the platonic solids, do fit inside each other, one into the other, as in somewhat of a matrix, and that all these different geometries all fit within this matrix. And some of the work of Nassim Haramein with a 64 tetrahedral grid, which if you look at it in a 3D, it projects on a 2D. The flower of life pattern, the science of cymatics shows that everything is oscillating. The fabric of space is like this plasmatic universe that is basically oscillating, and these geometries is what forms the physical matter that we exist in. And in fact, the entire periodic table of elements, all the elements are based on this, the molecules themselves as they appear is actually standing wave patterns of oscillations of these geometries. And that, I learned this many decades later, and our DNA is basically a dodecahedron that is based on the golden mean ratio, which is the ratio that goes into infinity. Even the amino acids are all based on this dodecahedral arrangement. Our bodies, nature, everything in nature is based on these ratios that go into infinity. Our planet, the Russians discovered the dodecahedral grid that's all over the planet, and that there is a star tetrahedral in our sun, the Mars, Venus, Jupiter, all across the universe, where you see these spots and different things occur at the 19.45 degree angle, which is the point of this star tetrahedral that's within. So you have these geometries interfaced within our planetary structure. Even the planetary orbits, are, the Mars, Venus are different geometries. And Nassim Haramein discovered that the on the paper which got a Nobel Prize on, that the Schwarzschild child proton is actually a fractal of the entire universe. It's like the scale that is fractal that goes into infinity, into the whole universe. And remembering, now the work I did with Marcel was before Dr. Emoto's work, where they found when you freeze water, at the moment of freezing, it captures the geometry. See, water is so sensitive with its dipole arrangement that whatever is happening in the environment with water, it will reflect. And so when you're thinking of thoughts of love, gratitude, compassion, you have this beautiful geometry symmetry, which is part of the matrix. The matrix that we're in is based basically on love. When you have a distortion of that, which is, you fool, you want to kill you, you're evil and I hate you, all that type of energy is a distortion of that matrix. And so Dr. Emoto's work is important in that aspect, in that it does show that the energies of mind, which project geometrically, is captured in water. And water has a six-sided geometry, which fits into this matrix. And in fact, when they dug down into the ice cores in Antarctica, they found all the 7 major classes of crystallography can be found formed in water. So water acts as kind of a universal resonator for all these different forms of geometry. Water, like quartz, is six-sided and has this six-sided geometry matrix that just happens to go back to here. When you look at a crystal when it grows, the angles on it are exactly 52 degrees. This 52-degree angle is there we go. Trying to get versed at this. 52-degree angle is the same as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And if you look at the sides of the pyramid at the 52-degree angle, you have the golden mean ratio, which means that there is a resonance into infinity with this particular angle. It's also discovered that let's see, I'm going to go into a different area here. Not that one, but let's see if I can move over here. Oh, it won't let me go over there. Let me see. There we go. I'm going to go over some geometry here. In the beginning, all was unmanifested.
Hydrogen, yeah.
These forms start to form and create this flower of life pattern. This 21 golden section harmonies within a pentagram, and there's a relationship between the pentagram and the hexagram, and the egg, the golden mean ratio and the square root of the golden mean ratio to the foci. And here you have in the 52-degree angle of the Great Pyramid, and here's a relationship between the Vesica Piscis of the 2 circles and the 52-degree angle, which is the same as quartz. Dr. Victor Schauberger discovered this as well in the hyperbolic cone as you slice it in the 52-degree angle. Let's see. Quartz, the energy through the crystals is spirals in a left to right hand spiral. This spiraling motion is at the nodal points of these geometries that change one frequency geometry to the next. The whole Earth has a grid around it, and at these nodal points where they connect, the energy vortexes and spins, and that's how it shifts from one frequency geometry to the next. Here's these ice core samples that are taken out of Antarctica, and they found that all the geometry showing that water is a universal resonator for that. Even when we look at things with our eye, they found that the golden mean ratio, here you can see this chart, is most pleasing to the eye because it resonates with this infinite ratio of geometry in nature. And, here's a distortion of the human body, showing that. I have this set up where Dr. Marcel Vogel took crystal and he had a winery in California where he pulsed this vibration of this refined wine into the crystal, and then had thousands of gallons of this rot gut California wine spinning around this crystal, and it was transferred from the crystal into the water that's in the wine. And how this is done, it's found that the intermolecular bonding angles of water is at 26 degrees and 104 degrees. What does that have to do? What's 2 times 26? 52 degrees. What's half of 104 degrees? 52 degrees. So what it is there's an angular harmonic resonance, just as in Marcel used to say, these technologies are akin to what we know in a normal physics and electromagnetics, where you have a pulse of an energy, and you'll have harmonics. And what it is a science of angular harmonic resonance, which is different than electromagnetics, but similar. You have like the pineal gland, which is like a pine cone, and a pine cone is like a long periodic antenna, which has this resonance. In radionics, you tune a dial in 360 degrees, and you can tune into anything in the universe within that 360 degrees. And in radionics, what they do is, in order to fine tune, they break it into more tuning dials. And this gentleman in England who I communicated to, Dr. Malcolm Ray, found that he had about 2,000 of these cards where he put these 7 bands, and then with these different angles coming in, he could create every element by putting it into this little box with a magnetic field, that this geometry at a different angle could create all the different elements. And he, used in homeopathic remedies. In the crystal lattice structure, which is different than glass. Glass is clear, but it's an amorphous. In other words, it's disorganized. In quartz, it's a completely organized structure. The Russians did an experiment with, they put a culture on one side blocked by a piece of glass, and they affected the culture. When they replaced the normal glass with a quartz window, the disease that they put in one culture, because of the higher frequency transmission of the ultraviolet frequencies, it was able to affect and cause the other culture to be affected. So showing that the quartz has a dimensional window that allows these higher frequencies in. Quartz also has a piezoelectric ability. The Pythagoras' star of creation is like a Jewish star, except it's got a dot in the middle, representing the point of creation. And as you offset this, as you squeeze it, you offset the charge triads, which are negative and positive and balanced in the middle, into an offset, which creates enormous amounts of voltage, which causes your cigarette lighter, to light when you click it. Similar in science, when phased arrays are used in antennas, you have a tremendous gain. Like here's the HARP facility up in Alaska. By spacing it at certain wavelength intervals. It's similar to in a quartz structure, you have this similar repetitive structure that causes amplification of this matrix. So we won't go any further in that one. yeah, time spirals. So this other interesting experience I had the same year in 1977, I found myself on board a craft with all these beings around, and this head being came up and put me into this spinning mechanism that started spinning so fast
Wow.
that I couldn't handle it anymore. And I got to the point where I said, I turn this over to my higher self. And I found myself on top of this beautiful mountain with the most euphoric experience I can't even put into words. It was
Wow.
as though they put me into a higher dimensional portal. And as I'm observing the reality, I start to notice it starts to flicker. And I find myself in like an old movie theater, and where it's actually projecting the reality. I'm actually seeing in between the pulses of creation that my consciousness is creating. It's like a consciousness happens so quickly, it has an illusionary aspect of being solid. But if you are raised to a higher level, you can actually see between the pulses of the creation, like in a movie projector. And I jokingly asked, what's the name of this movie? And it wrote in beautiful script, Journey of a Mystic,
Wow.
and and then I realized my bed was with my body in it, was laying there, and that I was able to bring that consciousness into a waking state. Anyway, just an interesting experience that happened that same year.
Amazing.
This painting, Russian painting, kind of reminded me of that. Um, and also how this unusual ET experience of craft coming up and down and things like that. But anyway, back to let's go into the one of the projects I worked with Marcel, which was the Delaware Camera. This is pictures back in the 1950s, where they were able to. It was patented by the European Patent Office. There's actual patent here, where it was patent in France, and they were able to make thousands of photographs with this device. And here's one photograph. Here's a little bit of a. I'm kind of moving along kind of rapidly. This everybody knows what a hologram is. A hologram is basically where you have an interference pattern, and it's basically what all reality is actually. And if the interference pattern, as the wave patterns interact with each other, it forms the hologram. Like say you do a butterfly. In a hologram, let's say you have one beam that's split, you have one that interacts with the object, and the other one is a reference beam. And when they come together, the difference between the two creates in space a hologram, which everybody's familiar with. Well, this instrument, it was able to, with sound resonators and tuning in with radionic dials, able to project holographically using a drop of blood or a hair or even a photograph as a witness that contains the vibrational essence. The drop of blood works best because the universe is fractal holographic in nature. In other words, if I take a drop of blood from you, Nori, and I put it on this plate and I tune into your frequency, no matter where you are, you can be on Mars, it doesn't matter. I can tune into you because your drop of blood contains the holographic. Let me go back here. I mean, your drop of blood contains the holographic whole of all of you.
Wow.
And so with this instrument, you're able to attune to that. And I got to show another screen. Okay. And so what is interesting is that it used sound resonators, and the sound resonators carried these subtle vibrations in the three axes and created in space a 3D hologram. Let's say the one example I have here of a woman that was 50 miles away, she was pregnant, and the fetus could be clearly imaged, and not only imaged, but was able to tune backwards and forwards into time. Now, in this camera, there was a structure above that had reflectors that reflect the energy back onto a photographic plate. Now, keep in mind that this whole holographic projection is in 3D, and you're only able to capture a slice of it. What I was working with Marcel and two other scientists was to bring this in. This is early 1980s, so we were trying to bring this science that was built back in the 1950s, that was thousands of photographs were made. It was patented by the European Patent Office. We were attempting to bring this into current scientific equipment and trying to reproduce it so it could be shown in real time. Now, this goes in a long discussion. Now, here's one of the photographs of the woman. She's 50 miles away, and it shows the skeletal structure of the fetus that they tuned into. Here's a more detailed schematic from the patent of the instrument. These are actual photos I took. Here we had, you would tune this to the resonance of the witness. You would tune into the aspect with the radionic dials. Remember angular harmonic resonance. You tune, radionics is nothing more than a tuning focus for the mind, where the instrument becomes an extension of your consciousness. And here's a picture of the inside. You can see here's the sound resonators, there are 3 of them. Here's the radionic dials, and here's the time spiral to move forwards and backwards in the time. It is beautifully machined out of brass. You can see the dials. Here is the time spiral. And I've worked on a number of radionic instruments. I built a number of them, and so I was fairly familiar with the mechanisms of how they worked. But I've never seen one that could move forwards and backwards in the time other than this one that I worked on. And here is the above cavity showing the reflector plates, reflecting the energy back onto the photographic plate. Now, what's interesting is many, many years later, there's a long discussion on it. You can go to marcelvogel.org and see all these lab notes. There's a lot of notes. What they found was there was empirical evidence supporting the macro scale quantum holography in non-local effects with the Delaware Camera. And these scientists were able to go with the computer and actually bring out the 3D imaging that was present in the 2D image that was captured on the film. And here you can see, the skeletal structure and things. Okay, let's see. Any questions?
Oof. Ori, you are muted.
I'm still back on the 52 degrees. That's amazing. So is every angle on a crystal 52 degrees?
Yes, every angle as it grows, this to the C-axis, which is the vertical growth axis, is 52 degrees.
That's amazing.
What Marcel found was that, let me go here to, yeah. Do a little bit more. Okay, here's a good example about the crystal. There we go. Share screen. Now, with a laser, what you have is you have 2 mirrors, one on each side. One is 100% reflective. The other one is, like, say, 99% reflective. You have say, a ruby rod crystal, for example, one form of laser. With a flash lamp, they excite the crystal, and it starts oscillating. It bounces back and forth, back and forth. And these mirrors are tuned to the resonance of this oscillation of this crystal. And so it bounces back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and builds up as every time, every subsequent reflection becomes more powerful and more powerful. So only about 1%, that 1% that can so strong it can cut through steel, comes out the laser. The crystal is similar to that, in that one side is the input, which is a female side, which is the universal resonating side, which is based on the 52-degree angle. The other side is the male, or the output side, which is the projecting end. It is a more acute angle, like a 60-degree angle. And here's an interesting experiment that Marcel did. Liquid crystals were growing on a sheet, and he was imaging, he was Catholic, and so he was imaging the Madonna. And the Madonna formed in this sheet of liquid crystals you can see here.
Wow.
And so when he first started out using a four-sided crystal like this, I used this crystal maybe 100 times. The first time when I got the crystals for Marcel for the laboratory, because we were working with 24 medical doctors in the San Francisco Bay Area. He cut that one as a gift for me. And on the way back, flying home, I'm sitting next to this football player on the plane, and he's holding his knee in pain like this. And I thought, well, I've been given a gift, and I should use it, and I said, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm kind of an experimental scientist, and if you would like, we could try some experimental, there's no bad side effects or anything like that. We can try an experiment. And so I went with the technique that Marcel, trained me on. And he got off the plane, and he was with his parents, and he's pointing at me. He says, that guy, he cured my leg. There's no pain in it. And I didn't do it. It's not me. I was facilitating him doing it. Basically, the procedure of what we go into, we have about 20 minutes or so left here, is that the first thing to do is understand that breath, as I mentioned earlier, is connected with a multidimensional transfer of energy when we inhale and exhale. And as you ask, every question pattern you put out to the matrix draws in the answer pattern. Ask and you shall receive, as they say. And so in order to work on somebody, I'll try to give the detailed procedure in a brief summation here. You can't work on a depleted body. If somebody's like completely out of it and they have this problem and they're asking you to, you have to, the person has to ask. You can't, force yourself, I'm going to heal you, you kind of thing, The person has to be willing to do it, has to be a willing participant, because they're actually healing themselves, and you're facilitating it by amplifying it and allowing them, guiding them to the core problem and helping them release it and have immediate transformation. I think I told you the story about how I met Marcel and drove all the way up to San Francisco. Did I?
No.
Yeah, I heard about his work, and so I drove in the middle of a storm all the way from San Diego to San Jose. It was like 100-mile-per-hour gusts over the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was at night. I knocked on his door, and he welcomed me in, and I said, I've heard about your work. I've got to find out what you're doing. I was like, I had this burning desire from that experience to try to understand the matrix of what we're in, what does geometry and crystals have to do with all this? Yeah. And so the first words out of his mouth was, "You're from another planet, aren't you?" And I said, I don't know about that. And so anyway, I sat down. He was working with his medical doctor, so I'm sitting with this medical doctor on the couch. And he turned off the lights for, it seemed, a half an hour and played classical music in the dark. And then we had a little discussion and a knock on the door, and a woman came with her daughter because she heard he was working with medical doctors in the Bay Area with these crystals. And she had a tumor that was protruding about 3/4 of an inch off of her ankle. And so as I'm sitting on the couch with the doctor and Marcel is doing his technique with the breath and the crystal and everything, we observed the tumor actually dematerializing before our very eyes. It dematerialized, it disappeared. And that left a lasting impression on me. So back to the procedure that he taught was that what you have to do is bring the energy up in the body, and you usually do that through breathing. And love is intimately connected with all this. The person has to have a love for themselves and a caring about the other person. And so what you do is he found that in using an electrostatic voltmeter that there's what is called a critical rotational angle, almost like turning a radio dial set. Everybody has a personal frequency that they resonate on. And with the crystal, if you rotate it at a particular angle and you become into resonance, and you can feel it, there's like a feedback loop. You can feel that you're in resonance with that person. Once you obtain that, you start to build the energy. And you build the energy with the person, work in the area that you're working. A lot of times you work in the thymus area. And what you do is you have the person ask in their mind's eye to go to the root cause, whatever the pain. It could be like a backache or a broken bone or something that's giving them signals that there's a disruption in the healthy, normal pattern, to go into that and ask to be shown where the root cause of this is. And it can come in any form, not to have any judgment. It could be like an emotion, a pattern, geometry, whatever it comes to you. Okay, and once the person has got that, okay, you got that, okay, and so then you deep breathe in unison with the person. And at a particular point in inhale, and at the point of inhale, they lock on. This all happens instantaneously with all these different things at once. I'm trying to break it down. But as they inhale, I tune into it and break the pattern and release it. And what happens, you do it with a pulse of breath, and immediate transformations happen. I've done this probably about 100 times with different people in different situations and everything, practicing as not to be a healer or anything, but more as a scientist, exploring these methods are being used. So yeah, you can do this without a crystal, but what happens with a crystal is that it bridges the dimensions, because our body is actually a hologram that appears to be solid at the low frequency vibration that's forming the physical form of us, but it's actually originating from a higher dimensional frequency that's happening, like that experience I had with the being, and the flashing of the in between the pulses of reality. If you go into that higher dimensional level, it is the blueprint that forms the lower. The lower doesn't form the higher forms the lower. And so when you bridge and couple the dimensions, you're actually pulling the rug out from this disruption of the natural healthy pattern. And all of a sudden you have like the tumor that dematerialized. It pulls the rug out from that reality, and it, boom, gone. So it's an amazing science. And I made this website, marcelvogel.org, just for other people that want to pick up the work, younger people who are interested in the science and take it to the next level, because the science has been developed in the secret space programs and beyond, they understand the geometry of consciousness. They understand the DNA frequencies. They understand how the scientists have got this figured out. But we're taught in the schools that are very, very extremely limited, you know, started with the Rockefellers and everything, that give us a very, very retarded sort of idea of science, where there's, which is a shame, because there is advanced science that we can learn from other off-planet cultures that we've been interacting with for so many decades, that have been hidden from the public. Anyway, that's any questions?
Oh yeah, and when you also brought out that the angular side of the Cheops pyramid is also 52 degrees, it's obviously whoever built that, they knew something.
Oh yeah. And speaking of which, look into Atlantis. I knew Dr. Ray Brown, who share a screen here real quick. Who was kind of a treasure hunter in Bimini, and this was in there was a show with Leonard Nimoy, you know, Spock on In Search Of, that talked about it, and Marcel Vogel is in there talking about this. This is a photograph I took of it. He went into this pyramid that was buried under sand. It was a storm, and so it uncovered it. And he went into the pyramid, and inside the pyramid, you know, my brother stayed with him for 2 weeks and got detailed description of what this room looked like. And to the best of my Photoshop skills, which are limited, this is what I was able to create for this room. There was 7 chairs circling. This was an Atlantis mastermind group, by the way. One chair was higher than the others, so you had 6 smaller chairs and a higher chair, and you had a pedestal in the middle holding this crystal sphere with a golden rod coming down from the center of this pyramid, and with a ruby crystal with a point on it, and it looked like it had burnt incredible energy. And there was a falcon with a talon and sun and other details and a breastplate and everything like that. But what's interesting is, like, it seems that these minds were interfacing into this huge pyramid, that this thing had a crystal capstone. And he was able to, you know, he got the crystal. And it's kind of a strange story. After he died, the caretaker accidentally dropped it and broke it, but I think it's a cover story. Not like the Nazis, you know, the cabal likes all these occult ancient knowledge, you know, things, so they probably grabbed it. Another interesting thing, besides the Michael Hedges crystal skull, which he also worked on, was I was working with Marcel when the Billy Myers case of the Simjazi was providing him these crystal and metal samples, which we put into the laboratory and found that it was a cold fusion process that couldn't be normally done on Earth. There's a picture of the material. And so I actually handled these samples during that time. This 1984 show, I'm talking about, you know, the crystals, and we had Marcel down a number of times to San Diego, you know, big expense, you know, $5 a person, you know, to have, we'd fly him down and he'd do lectures and things like that. So Atlantis apparently used this crystal as their mastermind group of whatever they were doing that interfaced into the geometry of this pyramid that was maybe affecting reality during those ancient times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
You mentioned something when you were on the ship with these extraterrestrial entities. You were shown this movie, well, you called it movie, of the scenery of the mountains there, and it was flickering as it was a reality going in and out of itself. And
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and that actually goes exactly like I have been explaining our reality. It's just like a square wave generator. It spikes up, goes straight across, and collapses to nothing. And then it moves over a little bit and spikes up over
Mm-hmm.
and collapses to nothing. And
Uh-huh.
in between those spikes, there is nothing. Is that the way it appeared to you?
Marcel used to say that in the brain, there's this pulsation that happens. As we, as we all know, the observer affects the experiment. We know about the consciousness collapsing the wave.
Yeah.
What When I was in this, when they put me through the spinning sensations, it makes you think of the whirling dervishes and all these different things, Um, I was experiencing like it was a real reality. It was this beautiful, beautiful reality I was in. I was like having, and like there was like this beautiful flute music playing in the background. It was like this euphoric reality. And as I observed the reality, it started to flicker just a little bit, pulsate, and then it went into, and what it is as we as we believe, so we receive, as they say. As you recognize something, it reflects, and as it reflects, you recognize it, and then this cycle continues, and it's like this feedback loop. It happens so quickly. It's like when you're looking at at the television set or anything. There's a pulsation that appears to be, or a 60 hertz fluorescent light. It looks like it's on, but it's actually pulsing off and on 60 times a second. But the eye can only determine 30 times a second. And so reality is such that it has an illusionary nature of being solid and real. But if you go into your higher consciousness of where in between the pulses of creation, you could say, we're each, Marcel used to say, we're made in the image and likeness of God, therefore we create. And each one of us is creating every instant according to our belief, and it's probably connected to our subconscious mind and everything. We're still learning about who we are.
Yeah. Boy.
This is all fascinating. I mean,
Yeah, I saw Emoto had done all that research on water and the different kinds of music and so on had effects on water. What really surprised me is that when you said Buddhist prayers, they also were not that crystalline in structure if they were subjected to Buddhist prayers.
Yeah, it's the intention.
Yeah.
It's the intention, what it's aligned with. Are you in alignment with the matrix? The matrix is, as Marcel used to say, our primary responsibility is to love. And
Hmm.
when I love you, it empowers you to be whole. Because he was probably the only scientist that really brought love into a scientific framework. And Dr. Emoto helped complement that, where, when love, gratitude, wisdom, all the things on one side, and there's a hate, anger, jealousy, all on the other side. One side seems to distort the matrix, and water is such a perfect reflection of consciousness. It reflects the environment. And so when you have a loving thought, the energies around you are alignment with this hexagonal matrix in which all forms are creating the entire universe, all the different elements of the periodic table, all the different elements of the universe are geometric in their nature and are basically oscillate. The oscillations create the geometries that that form.
Wow. Wow.
I tell you, this was a brilliant presentation because you found an easier way for me to understand what James Gates talked about when he said, the theoretical physicist James Gates, he says that deep in the equations of explaining the fabric of space, we find computer language. And when I'm looking at the geometry that you showed here, there is computer language in it. It can be explained through computer language. So now I understand more of the background of what James Gates talked about.
Yeah, and now we look at quantum computers, how they function in multi-dimensions at once, that
Yeah.
far surpass the computing capabilities. But it's kind of interesting, you know, the bits, the 64-bit, and then you go, you know, it's like there's in a 64 tetrahedral grid, you know, there's all these different relations, the Kabbalah, the 32 paths of the Kabbalah times 2, 64, chakras, you know, it's kind of interesting that Ruth Drown in the 1950s developed the Drown vision, which could take pictures of, like the Delaware camera, could take a picture of somebody from far away and had a confirmation. But she was reading the book by MacGregor Mathers, The Kabbalah Unveiled, and we had a spiritual, and so she based her dials based on the Sephira of the Tree of Life, and her own system. And that's the key thing to remember. George Delaware in the 1950s, he had the concept of how to create this instrument. And it's the creator of the instrument that's the most powerful. You are the most powerful in creating your own instrument and creating your own ways of doing things, because you are a creative being that we're like a fractal of a God creative mind.
Yay. Now, if we only know how to use it better, right?
Yeah, we have to keep reminding ourselves. Huh?
It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of
I'm
this.
with
And
you.
it's just,
Yep, I'm with you. I took a bunch of notes, but it's just so fascinating. Well, when you say the Matrix, you know, the Matrix, sometimes the connotation comes from the movie, you know, so when you say the Matrix, I'm getting like a positive connotation from you.
Oh
You,
yeah, a matrix, not as it can be illusionary, I guess, but it's more of a matrix. The word matrix means the mother of the form of which other forms come out of. And so that's an appropriate term, because the matrix is if you study the ancient occult writings of the stanzas of Dizian, which is old, they talk about the matrix being hexagonal with the center point being where its spirit feeds out, like it's just like in the quartz crystal. And so water and quartz, they both have these geometries that interface with mine because of this tetrahedral hexagonal geometry, in which all other geometries, as is illustrated, you know, in the ice core samples, can be formed universally. And so the matrix, in that sense, is not necessarily visible to our eye, but is the kind of the fundamental structure of the universe.
wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a bit to wrap your head
That's
around.
huge.
But, you know,
That's
there's so much more into it, and the more you dig into it, the more, you know, I didn't discover, you know, it was decades later I started looking at science articles and looking what Nassim was doing and other people. And whenever I see something with geometry, I dig into it, and you start to realize that, yeah, the whole structure is interrelated. And Marcel used to say that the energies of mind are geometric, and they are similar to what we see in the world of crystallography.
Wow. But you said something before that really struck me. It was that thought is immediate. Like with when
Yeah.
he was thinking about burning the plant, it was immediate.
I'm sorry. Say again, Nori.
No, you said before that thought was immediate. So
Oh,
that
oh, yeah, yeah. It's instantaneous. Yeah. When you think a thought, like in telepathy, when you think a thought of somebody, you're immediately resonating with it. When you think of somebody, you're thinking of their frequency. You know their frequency in your memory. And when you think of them, it's almost like they're a witness. And so when you think of somebody, just the principle of voodoo, you can good or
right.
bad, So um, everything's interconnected. It's important to understand these universal principles and use them for the benefit of humanity. Unlike unlike some of the stuff going
Unlike
on
voodoo.
today, yeah.
Oh my goodness. This is amazing, Dan. Thank you so much. I mean,
Yeah.
I need to review my notes so I could form a intelligent
Well, we'll
question.
have to do a part two, and we can dive in
Ah,
deeper. I mean, went over this really quick. This is just a 1 hour show, and so I didn't want to bore everybody with going into too deep a details and all of it, but it was kind of kind of the whet your appetite on some of the science that I would love to see more people explore into. But the thing that makes me sad is we know that our planet's been technologically hijacked, spiritually and technologically, and that they have, when you could spend decades researching and you still wouldn't be up to what they have already discovered. And I'd
Yeah.
much rather learn from, an extraterrestrial or some off-planet culture that has thousands of years of advancement, that have this understanding and share this knowledge, so we can go from that level on to the next level. The other beings on other planets, they live for hundreds or thousands of years. They've got it figured out. They don't have to deteriorate as rapidly as most people do. And so we could be living in a much higher harmonious state without the deceptions that have been perpetrated upon the people of this planet.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do another one in maybe some time here where we go deeper into some of these things, and there are other also subject areas that you could go into.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
And the different crystals, he's kept progressing into more sides, and then it went
that's
into
beautiful.
6 more sides. And what it was, when he did more sides, it created more of a spin. So the different crystals operate on different levels of the energetic form of the body. So he is experimenting, so yeah, unfortunately, he passed away in 91, and nobody's really, very few people have picked up the work that he's done and taken it to the next level.
Wow. Wow.
Well, chances are that there are some that has done it, but they work with the dark side. I'm sure that the CIA and other things, other entities, other groups, they have dived into this thing and they have perfected it for their purpose.
But like they said in Star Wars, they're only a master of the dark side.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And when you're just like Emoto's, with the structure, when you're in alignment with love, you're in alignment with the power of the universe.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And when you're in alignment with a distortion, you don't have the power of the universe behind you.
Yeah.
And that goes exactly like Albert Einstein said about a year before his death. He said in an interview, I've investigated the universe more than most people, and I found that it is all created from the vibration of love.
There you go.
Wow.
It's true. I love you guys.
Love you too. Thank you.
We'll do it again sometime.
Let's do
Excellent.
that.
Wonderful. Take care, everybody.
Take care now. See you in the next one.